Marathon 85. We're coming back at you here at episode number 3, our favorite albums, essential albums from 1985 to 1989. And joining us again is Tim. How you doing, Tim?
Good.
Excellent. John, how you doing?
Good. Awake.
All right. So, Tim, let's start with you. What were you listening to in 1985 through 89?
One of the albums that came out that I liked, song was, like I mentioned before, was Rats Out of the Cellar.
Oh, yeah, Rat.
I was working in downtown Toronto at the time and at a restaurant. And yeah, I remember that. And I remember one of the coworkers had that T-shirt on as well. And see, what else was I listening to? There's a lot of new wave too coming through. 85. Trying to remember some of the other albums of the other genres that were out. 85, 86 through that. Well, later on, I remember what I was listening to also, which was new. So it was when Guns N' Roses came on the scene. I believe it was 7. Again, I was working in Toronto, and that totally changed the landscape there for everything kind of to taper out of the 80s into the 90s. So there's that as well.
Yeah, those were two good albums. Appetite for Destruction certainly changed the landscape a little bit there. That was an excellent debut album, if not one of the best, and certainly of the late 80s.
Yes. Also, what I was listening to personally that maybe other people never has, they're a Scottish group. They're a progressive band, and they were produced by what the heck's his name from the producers for Yes, Trevor Horn, I believe it was.
Oh yeah.
A band called Palace, and they're from Scotland. And they had an album and some really cool album cover with sky ships and all this stuff. They look like, they got sails and everything, but yet they're floating in the air. It's just interesting album work. So it was a pretty progressive album. So those 3 I remember. I mean, there's so many more, but
yeah.
So,
what about you, John? What were you listening to? What were some of your favorites of the day?
Well, the Joshua Tree came out by U2.
Yeah.
That was huge.
Yeah.
More of a field drummer, Larry Mullen Jr. Definitely, just a great album. And then Rush came out with Power Windows. I know for a while there in the mid 80s, I stopped listening to the radio. Then I came back with Power Windows, and it's like, it was, and I know they were trying to sound a little bit like U2, or at least incorporate it into their style. So yeah, those 2 for me for late 80s.
Yeah, no, can't go wrong there. Well, I've got a couple of props like I always do. So in 86, this album was certainly on the turntable and didn't come off for a long time. Master of Puppets by Metallica. I saw this tour actually, 20th Row Floors. Actually, and I'm going to give him a shout out. I went with Chuck. Him and I went to this and to this concert, Maple Leaf Gardens. And that concert, by the way, is on YouTube. And it was a phenomenal, show. The album, there pretty much isn't even a bad song on the album. It's pretty heavy. But after this, man, I tell you, it became a really tough choice for me because I was into a lot of bands. Bon Jovi was huge. Whitesnake was huge. But one album came out in 89, and it was the big comeback album people have been waiting on. And it's none other than one of my other favorite bands of all time, the Rolling Stones' Steel Wheels. And I remember the day when this was played. The entire album was played on Q107 here in Toronto. And it was such... the anticipation of this album was bigger than life. I love the Stones, always have, always will, but this one here, this was big, this was huge, and I mean, granted, there was a lot of competition from Bon Jovi was huge, Whitesnake was out, Judas Priest had albums out, Motley had albums out. It was a big time for a lot of bands, and like Tim said Guns N' Roses.
There's one other album that you jog my memory, and I remember it. Okay, Iron Maiden came out with Somewhere in Time.
Yes,
and
had that.
I saw the concert at the Maple Leaf Gardens. We went on a whim just to go down to see if we could score some tickets from some scalpers, and we did. $20. We're on the right or left side of the stage, and we were perfect. It was just absolutely perfect. And so I remember that album, and in fact, I was listening to it last weekend. I remember it's like, yeah, I couldn't figure why I hadn't been listening to it more, because it was really, really good sounding album.
We got a minute or two left, and that album there, my Iron Maiden, I had that album. Judas Priest also had Turbo, which was a big album. But at that time, one of the big things that was happening with drummers and happening with guitarists were bringing in those synthesizer guitar synths. But on Somewhere in Time, one of the biggest complaints about that album was they brought in a drum machine supposedly to help Nico McBrain. John's sitting there, but he wants to say something. I can see it. Hey, John, am I not right about that?
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I stopped listening to the radio. Drum machines just started to technology started to take over that time, and for good or bad, a lot of it was bad.
Now, in fairness to Iron Maiden, the next album that came out was called Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. They got rid of the drum machine, by the way. That didn't work, and it was a major complaint that the drums on that album, Somewhere in Time, were just not up to par. And even Nico McBrain was complaining at the time about it. So, I mean, great album, great songs, but thankfully they got rid of that for the next one.
Yeah.
I guess from my point of view too, I didn't really notice that too much.
Yeah, no, I remember that was a big issue. But listen, we better wrap this up for another episode here, gentlemen. It's a good one, another good 85 through 89. So let's wrap it up, and we'll do it again next week.
Okay, doke.
All right, take care, guys.
All right, thanks, man.